Welcome to the DWRDNET Stationery Feed, Episode 2. Today on the show, we have Jonathan Butler, owner of Butler Stationery, based in Columbia, Tennessee. Jonathan, thanks for taking some time to talk to me today. So, just to get started, why don't you kind of introduce yourself and, talk about your store just in a brief sense, and then we'll get on to some of the opening questions.
All right. Jonathan Butler's my name. I've got a store called Butler Stationery here in Columbia, Tennessee. I opened it up almost 3 years ago now, 3 years ago next month. It'd be 3 years. Just moved it to a new location at the beginning of this year, so I'm now in a more visible space. But selling fountain pens, regular pens, inks, journals, papers, all kinds of little things like that, and just some other items that are related to writing. So I've got some teas as well. I think that's it.
Okay. So, what first got you into pens and stationery? Was it something that you were into as a kid and it kind of followed you throughout your life, or is it something that you came into later on in life?
Around high school. When I was growing up, we didn't have. So I grew up in a little town, little bubble, just northeast of Nashville, and so we didn't have computers, we didn't have internet. I'd always kind of seen things in movies and stuff, and always liked them, but I just didn't have any way of ever finding them. And then once I got into high school, got a little bit more access, a little more visibility to things, so I was able to kind of. And then after high school, sorry, I was trying to mute the notifications. Got more access to the internet, found more things that I liked, but I'd always hated buying pens online. Couldn't stand it because you can't really tell what it's going to feel like, what it's going to write like, if you're going to like it or not. So I've always wished to have a store close by that I could go to and actually, shop and try things out. So when the opportunity presented itself, I decided to give it a go.
Okay. So, since you own a stationery shop, what pens do you currently have ink in? What are you writing with currently?
Well, if you follow my Instagram, I just inked up one of the Diplomat Vipers that came out in November. I'm a big fan of those. I like that one a lot, especially the brown one they just released, which I just inked up. I put the Diamine Ancient Copper in it because matchy. But I've got that one inked up. Here lately I've been carrying, I've got a Mont Blanc Boheme with a retractable nib that I've been carrying for a little while. And I've got a book of 32 pens that are mostly inked up. A couple of Lamy 2000s, a couple of Lamy Studios, and then I've got a Sailor Pro Gear. What else? I've got a Rote Ring Newton, a couple of Pilots, the Vanishing Point, of course, and then I have a handful of locally made pens from Pens by Pasquale and TriStar Studios, as well as Signature Pen Company out of Spring Hill.
Okay, so you have quite a few that you keep inked. If you had no budget, what would be your Grail pen? If someone would give you any pen that existed, what would be your go-to kind of Grail pen? If you didn't have to pay for it, money was no object.
Right now, probably the Pilot Custom Urushi. I really like the blue one they just released, and I don't know. I've always liked that pen. It's a big, beautiful pen. I know that there are more expensive ones, and there are probably what people would consider better ones, but there's just something about that one that I feel like I've always been, ever since I wrote with one, I think 3 years ago, right before I opened the Pilot rep came into the store to sit down with me, and he had a bunch of Pilot pens, and he had one of those inked up, so I was able to write with it. After that, I was kind of smitten by it.
Yeah, someone had one of those at the Arkansas show I was at recently, and I got to write with it, and I know what you mean. That something about those Urushi pens and those Pilot pens in general. I'm a big Pilot fan as well, so that's definitely a great choice. So, cover kind of pens. In terms of ink, what are some of your ink preferences? Do you use the same inks all the time, or do you like to experiment with new inks, or what's your view on inks, and what are some of your favorites that you use on a regular basis?
About the only thing I go back to regularly is the Diamine Ancient Copper, and then the Pilot Namiki Black. I use that in a lot of pens. I'm very much a explore the world and try different inks I have kind of gravitated towards matching the pen to the ink just because I've got a store and I have all the ink at my disposal, so why not? Um, but I'm also a big fan of mixing inks. I think it's fun to experiment, try different mixes and see what the results are. I've never had any issues mixing cross brands or anything like that. So I think if you've got more inks, like get them out, play with them, mix them up, see what you come up with. You may come across a color that you really, really like. Just like the diamine pumpkin and the lamy turquoise that I told you about. When you mix
Yeah.
that, it makes this beautiful tourmaline green. So like it's just one of those little things you can just play around and have fun with it.
Okay, so what about papers? What's your favorite paper to write on, or what are a couple of your favorites?
My top favorite would have to be the Nebula paper that you did a video on recently. I really like it, especially for like a daily use because it dries pretty well. It absorbs a little bit, so it doesn't take up forever to dry, but it shows the ink really, really well. Um, so as far as like one of my top papers would be that. Rhodia comes in pretty top too, just mainly because of the price point and for daily use. Shows the ink really well, dries pretty decently, doesn't break the bank, it's affordable, so you can rip sheets out, throw it away, and not feel bad about it. The new Aerofil paper, I like it more than the Tomoe River. Even though it does write a little thicker, I think it shows the ink better. And then it's just, I'm hoping that that becomes more widely available and more used in notebooks as time comes on. Um, yeah, I mean, I like Clairefontaine. It's not my favorite, but they do make good paper. I do carry those in the store. Yeah.
Okay. And then my kind of the last of my kind of standard questions, I'll call them, that I want to kind of ask anybody who's going to be on the show. What's your favorite stationary adjacent item? So an example might be a bag you carry your stuff in, or a lap desk, or a book weight, or a clip. What's your favorite stationary adjacent item that you use on a regular basis?
Ooh. I'd probably have to say just kind of some leather goods made for it. Like I've got a good local leather maker, makes the journal covers, but the pen sleeves that he makes, I use one of those. If I've got a pen, it's in one of his sleeves. Um, Trying to think what else as far as a stationary adjacent item. Tea.
Well, I mean, in
I'm a
cases
big
kind of
tea
fall
drinker.
in that. Well, yeah, tea. That definitely would be a consumable stationary adjacent
Right.
item. The cases makes perfect sense. I think that's one of those things. I dabbled in making journal covers years ago, and I made some pen sleeves. And when I kind of got back into the hobby, I found a tote full of all those random leather things that are sitting around the house. So made them 10 years ago, and they're still great. You could pick one up and put a pin in. So that makes perfect sense. So now let's get into more specifics just about, your shop and everything about it. So you said earlier on you decided to open up about 3 years ago. Um, Now that you're a few years in, what's your favorite part about running the shop?
Favorite part was and has been just the people. I've always liked working retail because I like talking to people. I like meeting new people. Um, with the pen store, I get to spend the day geeking out about pens, which is fun. But I think to go along with the meeting people, one of my favorite aspects would have to be the teaching part. Being able to introduce new people to a pen and teach them about the pens, delve into the history of the pens, why they are what they are now, how they became to be. Um, that part that's probably my favorite part is the teaching. Just being able to
Okay.
introduce somebody to it, and I tell people all the time it's a deep rabbit hole, and I'm more than happy to help them as far down the rabbit hole as they want to go.
And that's a great thing because there's so many people who they only use online. And, think about filling a vac filler for the first time. That can be really daunting, or really messy if you do it incorrectly. So having somebody who's willing to answer questions is great. I know I've been in your shop a couple of times when you have someone brand new who will walk up and they're just, they have no idea about anything. And I've kind of heard you explain. So it makes perfect sense because, you're kind of in your element that I've seen that just when I've been in there shopping of, you know, guiding a new person of, what are your preferences? Well, here's a couple of options. So you're not telling him this is the only way. You're giving them options and letting them learn while you're explaining what the different things do. So that definitely makes sense. Along those lines, within your shop, and you kind of referenced this earlier, I know you like to support, some of the other small business owners, specifically Columbia, but there's some others as well. Tell me about what, makers that you carry their products in your shop. I know you have the leather, you've got some pins and the mugs. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, I've got 3 local pin makers. I've got Pins by Pasquale, TriStar Studio, and Signature Pin Company. So Pins Pasquale and TriStar are both here in Columbia. Signature Pin Company is up in Spring Hill. I still have one of Jim Hines' pins. I need to probably order more from him, but he's down in Dallas. And then I've got some locally made inks as well. They're just for dip pens. She doesn't have a way of filtering them to be fountain pen friendly. But it's a little small group down here. They call it Athendale Pen Company. And then I've also got Jake, the Cypress leather. He makes the leather goods here in Columbia. He does journal covers, pen sleeves, and all kinds of other things. I'm hoping to get him to fill up a whole shelf for me of, doesn't even have to be stationery related stuff, just leather goods, because it smells nice and it takes up a good amount of space and it looks good. But I've been trying to find as many locally made things as I can, because I want the store to be as beneficial to as many people as possible. I don't want it to just be my store. I want it to be a place where a lot of people can come for different things, but local makers, if they feel like they have something that would work well in the store, then I want them to bring it in and set it up. I've got Tracy Colin's mugs, and she's down in Atlanta. Her husband is a pen maker, goes by Hooligan, Georgia. He makes beautiful pens and she makes beautiful pottery. So they're like the perfect little creative couple together. They just work in their home and make things and create all day long, which is living the dream as far as I'm concerned. So I keep in touch with them. I like her mugs a lot. They're big. If you like a big mug, like most of them hold about 20, 21 ounces. I've got a couple that are smaller, but she comes up with really unique designs and they just look really nice and they feel good in the hand. Nick Pasquale makes pins here in town. He's, in my opinion, like, I'm sure people would contest this. Nick would probably contest it too, but one of the best pen makers in the country. His fit and finish is second to none, and he doesn't put something out until he knows it's perfect. Like, he doesn't, put out half-made things. On the flip side of that, there's Scott with TriStar Studios. He is not afraid to experiment, which I really like because he comes up with so many cool designs. He does a lot of cool things with brass and bronze rings. And he's just, he'll put something out there even if he doesn't feel like it's perfect, but he does a really good job. But the stuff that he comes up with is just super cool and unique, and it's just great to look at. He's been doing a lot of wooden pins, which if you go or have, I don't know when this will be on there, but if you're going to go or have been to the Atlanta Pin Show, he's going to be set up there selling some of his new pins there. But I've got one of his that I had him make for me out of this really nice, what we thought was black brown and like kind of a bronzy color. But once he actually made the pen, it's actually a dark, dark purple instead of black. But he got it made, and then when he gave it to me, finally, I just happened to have a 1920s Schaefer nib that was the right size, so I was able to fit it into the, I think he uses Bach or Yovo, I can't remember. I think he might use Bach.
I think both Nick and Scott use Bach.
Yeah, but this Yovo nib, or this Schaefer nib, fit perfectly into the Bach number 6 housing, so I fit that to it, and it's probably one of my favorites, because it's, again, it matches the ancient copper pretty well, so I can put that in there, and it works well together. Then we got Signature Pin Company from Spring Hill. He's been making pins a long time. I think he's one of the people that taught Nick a lot. I may be wrong on that. Hopefully Nick doesn't punch me in the head for that one. But he makes some really beautiful pins. He does bespoke pins, kit pins, all of them. He uses a lot of another local maker. I don't have any of his direct stock in the store, but there's a company here in Columbia called Blankworks. that makes blanks for people to make pens with. And he does also some beautiful things that he comes up with. So he does a lot of like the watch gear pen blanks, things like that.
Okay. So, in addition to new stationery, you also are one of the only people in the area who does vintage pen repair. Talk about that and how you kind of got into the vintage, restoration for the older pens.
I love the vintage, and I love fixing things. I love taking things apart. I like breaking things because that sometimes happens. It's a good way to figure out how something needs to come apart if you break a couple of them first. Um, I've always been one to um, just try to take things apart, see how they work, try to make them work again. And so once I got into pens and I started coming across more vintage pens, I started just pulling them apart, seeing what they do, how they work, what needs to be done to make them work again. And then found some books, read up online, found all the posts on the fountain pen forums and the subreddits. So between that learning and then just experimenting and seeing what works, it's been a lot of fun. There are some challenging ones. I've got a bunch to do right now, but I do really enjoy the vintage restoration stuff. I think it's a lot of fun, and you get to see a lot of really cool old pens that, otherwise I would have never been able to put my hands on. And then the best thing about that too is when someone brings one in that has a family tie or they have some kind of history with the pen. I had a lady a year or two ago, she brought me in two pens. One pen her mom bought in 1954 when she got a job as a secretary. It was a Esterbrook SJ. And then another pen that her grandmother bought in 1923 when she got her first job.
Ooh.
And it was a Waterman's with the silver overlay in the Gothic pattern. And I mean, both of them were beautiful pens. The Waterman, I didn't have to do anything to the nib. Once I got it apart, new ink sac, cleaned it up, inked it up, and it wrote just beautifully. Just real soft, flexible nib. The Esterbrook had a very interesting broad nib on it. It was a broad, but it had a chisel tip on it too. So if you held it up a little bit more vertical, you'd get a stub. But if you held it at a regular writing angle, it was just a real fat broad nib. But just to be able to have somebody come in and say, yeah, I've had these pens for decades and I've never been able to use them, but they belong to my mom and my grandmother. To be able to get those back to working and now she can use them and write with them. Like, I love doing that kind of thing. I think that's probably one of the most rewarding parts of it.
Okay. So you mentioned earlier that you're in a new location. You got more room. So what have you been able to expand into now that you have more space? And, what are some of your plans for the future as, time and resources allow? What do you plan to add or grow now that you have more space to work with?
I've got a big table. I'm hoping I can find somebody that is interested in teaching cursive or calligraphy, or anything really. It's a big 10-foot table in the front area. So if somebody has something that they want to host a class or an event, it's there. If they want to do something that's a little messier, I've got a big 35 by 20-foot room in the back that's unfinished. So like if somebody wanted to do some painting or anything like that, they can do that back there. I've added teas. So I've got some bag teas and some loose leaf teas. Right now I've got a mod tea, which is one of my favorite teas because it's good and it's not expensive. So that's what I try to look for in things like that, because I want things that people aren't going to be afraid to drink or use because it costs too much and they don't want to have to replace it. So I'm wanting to do classes. I'm wanting to eventually, if everything goes well, I want to try to incorporate an actual like tea shop, have a little like sell tea by the cup. I don't want to do like steamed milk or anything, just regular hot water, tea leaves, and cream and sugar if you want it. Um, Other than that, mainly I'm just wanting to try to find more ways to get creative and utilize that big unfinished room that I have, because right now it's massively underutilized. And I think there's a lot of potential to do things. I just gotta find the right people that are interested in hosting something or doing something, and just getting the people there.
Okay. And we'll put Jonathan's contact information in the show notes. So that way, if you are someone who teaches calligraphy or teaches cursive, or, that sounds interesting to you, you could get in touch with Jonathan and maybe y'all could work out something. You never know who will come across these. So hopefully, there's that local person who's looking for a spot or looking for a class to teach. So maybe you'll be able to find somebody through there. So as we start to wrap up, speaking of that, tell everybody where they can find you, like where in Columbia, or how to find you online, how to contact you, if they have questions or want to learn more about your, what you do or your shop in general.
Oh, okay. It's the address is 119 Nashville Highway, Suite 127, Columbia, Tennessee 38401. It's in right now. It's the Harbor Freight Shopping Center. I'm on the very opposite end of Harbor Freight. Behind me, there's a real classic barber shop called Salazar's, and then just a few doors down from me, there's a game store called Game Night, and then next door to me, there's a big church that's supposed to be going in at some point. The website is butlerstationery.com, and that's ERY, which I'm sure anybody watching your video would already be aware of, but a lot of people still spell it ARY, which is technically correct because it is a stationery store.
I think autocorrect is the biggest victim on that, because sometimes I've had autocorrect change the stationary to stationary. And,
Right.
That's when it gets confusing.
Yep. And then just, rest of the contact information is right there on the website, the email address and the phone number. So if anybody calls, I normally only answer the calls during business hours. Text messages, I'll answer just about any time. Same for emails.
Okay, and also, Jonathan posts on Instagram. That's a good way to see new stuff that's coming into the shop. So Butler Stationery on Instagram, definitely check that out as well.
On Instagram, it's Butler Pin and because
okay.
I formed the Instagram the first time, it instantly banned me. Don't know why. Never could undo it. So on Instagram, Butler Pen and Ink, and on Facebook, it is Butler Stationery.
Okay. So I think we'll kind of end there. So I want to, once again, thanks to Jonathan for taking some time to kind of talk. And if you,
Thanks for having me.
No, it's great. I obviously come into your shop on a fairly regular basis. I like to frequent all the local stores because you never know that new thing you're going to come across. It might be a new pen by Nick or Scott, or, I went in there one day and I came back with my Viper, which I actually really love, and I use that all the time now. But if you teach classes or have any information, leave a comment on the video if you're watching this on YouTube, or if you're listening on Apple or Spotify. I believe you can leave comments on there. If not, then you could get in touch with Jonathan if you teach classes, or you might be able to fill in some of those gaps he's looking as his store is growing. And until next time, thanks for watching the DWRDNET Stationery Feed, and we'll see you on the next episode.